Good afternoon and welcome once more for a very interesting and intriguing podcast, this time with Professor Amitav Banerjee, medical doctor, epidemiologist, and emeritus professor at the Medical College D.I. Patel in Pune. Thank you very much for joining in, Professor Banerjee.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to come on this platform.
The reason I invited you today is because the last few weeks we saw an enormous explosion in the media, talking about all kinds of viruses that we once again should be afraid of. We have seen articles on RSV, norovirus, HMPV is now going around the globe. We have bird flu that is extremely of an extreme concern in the western part of this globe at the moment. How do you look at this? Because if we look back in history before the COVID pandemic, these outbreaks were relatively common, considered normal. Nobody really paid a lot of attention to it when it happened. And since the COVID crisis, I see that the fear-mongering and scaremongering of media just appears to have taken a worse turn. What's your reflection on this?
You are right, Sam. This is sensation is created for very minor things, and the major things are neglected. I see at least, as you said, we had those pandemics earlier, which were really pandemics, like plague killed 30%, 40%, decimated village, whole towns, and similarly with smallpox. Those were pandemics actually. And even then, we cannot recollect they were such that the whole world was locked down. So this is something, and COVID, I think it started with COVID, this fear mongering, and everyone had their skin in the game. As you said, the media is also, but media, you have to say the media gives the output, the inputs they are getting. So now we have got the celebrity scientists, celebrity doctors who get their moment of fame, and everybody picks up. Then a large number of vested interests, they also come into play. And that after some time they start, I feel they start really believing in what the narrative is. So that is something, and the group thing comes in. And I don't know about other countries, but it is, I think, a global phenomena. The medical education is also becoming very, very superficial. In the sense, there is too much of information, but there is less time of introspection. Like we are having too much of, I see, specialty and super specialty. So each doctor, after he or she passes out, they go into their narrow field. So they are very good in a particular narrow field, but they don't connect the dots. So they are thinking like a person goes into, earlier we used to go into pathology. I mean, all colleagues who went into pathology, and pathology included parasitology, microbiology, everything. Then microbiology is separated. Now virology are separated. So each one is solving a piecemeal of the whole problem. And they are chasing one thing, and they are raising the, say, not only virus, they are going for the genetic gene sequencing and all. They are good as academic pure science exercises, but immediately they jump the gun and the media takes it up. Oh, new mutant has come, and the panic is created, and the narrative is built as if the monster is created, which is not there. I mean, if you see, the viruses have been there since ages, thousands of viruses. Since ages, humans have adapted to it. Their biological ecosystem, there is a biological symbiosis, and according to Darwin's law, the viruses, they mutate to survive, and they become milder and milder. I mean, the natural.
Of course, a virus that kills someone doesn't have a lot of chance to replicate. Of course, so
it's a dead end. They're a dead end. So they won't. They would adapt, and they would adapt that even if their wrong should not cause severe symptoms. The person either he dies, or the person isolates because he's symptomatic. People will avoid. So those strains will amplify and perpetuate, which can spread mostly the asymptomatic strains. And in the last pandemic, a very peculiar thing happened. We were taught that just the presence of a pathogen, it does not define as a case. And in this, not only the presence of a pathogen, even the nuclear remnants by RT-PCR, they were labeled as cases. So that inflated the case count. And that would...
That's something I found peculiar as well when I was still a lecturer and head of research in Europe myself, that up until August 2020, everyone, all experts and media outlets, journalists were talking about hospitalizations and mortality, which in my view are well-established parameters. You know, it's clear if you end up in a hospital, it must be severe. And if you die, it's a very clear outcome. You know, it can't have a better defined outcome, unfortunately. But they changed the narrative in August 2020, and I saw it happening globally. Suddenly, from hospitalizations and mortality, they went on to cases. They started talking about infected cases. And I was like, now we're going for a wrong turn. Because most of the population, by then, the virus was circulating. A lot of people were positive, were COVID positive, but they didn't experience symptoms, or they had a mild flu, or even some tested positive, but didn't have any proof that they were infected. The so-called false positive PCR tests. So suddenly we weren't talking about a few hundred hospitalizations and a few hundred deaths. No, we were talking about 100,000, few 100,000 people infected. And that's what I saw happening around me. People were in total panic after August 2020, because suddenly the figures were blown out of proportion, because we were not looking at the facts anymore, but at tests. What's your take on that?
You are right. I mean, I found it so. I was also perplexed. I mean, I had been an epidemiologist in the armed forces, and I had been investigating a number of outbreaks among troops, among soldiers, because we have got very large army. We have got large training centers. Recruits come from all parts, so they are frequent. We had gone in, I think, 2000, almost 2020, and in my team was a microbiologist. So there was an outbreak of pneumococcal pneumonia in Wellington, in that training center, Madras training center. Large number of 30, 40 simultaneous clusters and all that. So I had gone, with me was a microbiologist, and he wanted the samples, blood culture and all. I said, why don't you take that throat culture? Here you will get pneumococcus, streptococcus pneumonia. He says many people carry it. Those are not cases. I mean, I still remember that. He says, so many people, as a microbiologist, I can pick out anything from your throat. I don't label you as a case. I require a blood sample that whatever the symptoms the patient is having is due to that microbe. Throat, so many, they are commensals, he said. Even streptococcal pneumonia also, many people carry it and commensals without. So those, I won't define it as a case. I still remember that. And I was very surprised when, I mean, streptococcal pneumonia is a bacteria which is causing that outbreak is going on, and still he said, I will not label it as a case. I will only label those cases which are positive in blood culture, or a pleural tap, or a transtracheal from the deep in the lungs. Throat. I was really surprised when they were taking the nasal swabs and this and there. You can pick up anything, streptococcus or any meningococcus. You can raise a panic anytime like this. So I was really surprised. And I don't know, you also must have come to that certain incidents, like in New Zealand and in USA, person has died of a gunshot wound. And when they did RT-PCR positive, they labeled him as a COVID death.
That's what we saw, and my colleagues that were
traffic accidents.
Yeah. If they were positive with COVID, they got declared as COVID disease.
They changed the basic epidemiological foundation. Epidemiological foundation is that starts with the death certification, and the death certification also they distorted. I mean, the cause of death is, a person may have so many comorbidities, and immediate cause of death may be something else. This may be incidental. As you said, people have got the widespread virus, it has spread. Everybody is carrying it in their throat. And they are not only going for the live virus, they were going for the remnants, the fossils of the virus. I mean, this is something, I mean, and I am really concerned now. The same thing they are going to do with the trials, the BCG trials, which has the vaccine, which has never worked. For past 50 years, it has never worked for tuberculosis. Now they are restarting the BCG trials in adults. They are trying to use those same diagnostics in for tuberculosis. I'm really worried what they are going to do now, because so many of us, we were taught that infection does not equal to disease, particularly in tuberculosis. So many of us carry the dormant stage, and only few. So,
But what do you think is pushing this? You know, and you were talking earlier on as well that the media suddenly changed the way they approached public health as a topic. Who's steering this? Because it appeared to become suddenly out of the blue somewhere in the beginning of the pandemic, and everyone started to follow a narrative. Now the same thing with the tuberculosis vaccine. Well. If there are so many, I keep wondering, there are so many data showing that there are safety issues with certain kind of vaccines, not only BCG, but other ones, HPV, you name it. But why how is it possible that these trials can keep continuing and that governments keep supporting this and that pharmaceutical industries can keep doing this without any repercussion? I don't get it. And you were talking earlier about that there is a steering behind it, the whole mechanism. Who is steering this, in your opinion?
It starts, I mean, there are people definitely with their own conflict of interest. The pharma has to make profit. And the research is not independent nowadays. The research grant is given by pharma who want to push their products. And the scientists, if they don't follow that roadmap, I mean, to prove that or to establish the drug is beneficial, they will not get a grant next time. And they fall out. And only those who go up, who follow the tune set by the sponsors. So until unless we have independent research by public funds, we are going to fall. I mean, we are not going to get out of this mess we are in. And now, unfortunately, the medical journals have also been compromised. Even the editors like Richard Houghton of Lancet or Richard Smith of BMJ, they have given statement on record that they have become the extension arm of the pharma industry. But still, Lancet is publishing what they want, because I think even he doesn't have a say, even if he knows what's happening, particularly the present Richard Smith, of course, is no longer the chief editor. But these editors, they know what's happening, but they will lose their job in any case if they don't. I mean, you have seen so many papers have come out in leading journals, which are really, I mean, which shouldn't have. I mean,
what you are talking about is, there's also something very strange, in my opinion. You're not alone with this vision. Look at my open letter in August 2020 was co-signed by 1,500 people questioning the COVID measures. Those people were all professors, medical doctors, immunologists, epidemiologists, virologists. The same thing happened a few months later with the Great Barrington Declaration. In the meantime, I think they have about 60,000 signatories. So there are so many health professionals who are aware of this. And still, it appears that we are not able to make a fist against that system, that we are not able to get through to the mindset of governments to change their approach on public health issues, but also on safety analysis. We have the FDA here in India. We have the same thing, FDA in the US. How is it possible that these institutes are still capable of being so biased, knowing, because you cannot tell me if there are so many health professionals arguing against this phenomena, that governments can still comply with this?
Some do not have the moral courage to go against the mainstream. Some are compromised because they have to return a job. They have got their own responsibilities. So it's not easy. And doctors nowadays cannot practice in isolation. Earlier, doctors could start a private practice. They have to work with the corporate. They have to work with corporate hospitals. So once they are with corporate hospitals, they are trapped rather. I mean, they have to surrender their autonomy, decision making. Like if you are working in a corporate hospital, you have to have so many procedures done, so many investigations done, costly investigations, so many interventions done. And if you do not meet the target, you lose your job. So, I mean, they are.
That's what we see in hospitals, also in academia. We see it everywhere, right? It's the pressure to publish, perish or publish. We see it everywhere, but governments are elected people, and I always wonder how it seems so difficult to
They have closed
change
ranks.
government's perspective on public health, knowing how can they support HPV if you know that so many research points in a direction that states that there are safety concerns. How can you keep pushing this? Same with the WHO. What's your take on the WHO and governments in general? I find it so hard to believe that they seem to unable to accept the fact that there are no such things as set beliefs in science. Science keeps evolving and we discover new things, and we have to quite often change our view because new data emerge. But apparently governments and WHO are always cognitive dissonant. I don't know what's playing there.
Same dynamic. WHO is financially facing problems. I mean, it started facing problems 20, 30 years back. And then once the pharma stepped in, and the Gates Foundation and others, they are the major funders now, and it self-perpetuates. And the very fact that they had during the pandemic, and now they want to legitimize it, that they will be no misinformation. They have labeled as misinformation. I mean, any alternative views is labeled as misinformation, which is very unscientific. There is no such thing as misinformation in science. I mean, science should have a hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. So now they want to put their own hypothesis down your throat without the alternative hypothesis, and they are censored. They are misinformed. I mean, they will be labeled as misinformants or conspiracy theories. So these are not scientific terms. These are something like George Orwell's 1984 or authoritarian regime. Science does not thrive on authoritarianism, bureaucracy. So they have become a big bureaucratic monolith with no science. Because the very fact that you want to say that misinformation, and they have started this misinformation, they have started vaccine hesitancy, which are stigmatizing terms. You see, why should vaccine hesitancy be stigmatized? Because every scientist should have a hesitancy of any new intervention. Scientists, as you said, should be open to change ideas with fresh evidence. So he or she has to be hesitant. If he or she is not hesitant, he or she is not a true scientist. If you are very certain that this works without any iota of uncertainty, and the moment you get an iota of uncertainty, WHO labels you as vaccine hesitant. That is not science. That is faith. Faith has to accept what science has to question. And the moment you question, WHO will deplatform you, or your university will sack you, as you experienced firsthand. So this is not the scientific temper. I mean, science thrives on disagreements and debate. When there is a censorship, you are silencing people. So that is the most unscientific thing. So WHO is not a scientific. WHO has become a political organization. It's not only political, it's a dictatorial, authoritarian, and they have taken all the world government into collusion. Because most of the government leaders or heads of state can't solve the problems. So these are a very good distraction to the people. Look, a pandemic has come. We are saving you. And the farmers come. So now, earlier there was the wars. they used to declare war, and the arms race used to promote it. So now the pharma race has overtaken the arms race because pharma race is more lucrative than arms race. And the people think the government is acting in their interest. They have just build up the fear that this pandemic is coming. Like earlier, they used to build up the fear of the enemy country will attack you. So we prepare the ammunition, we prepare the now it's a pandemic is coming. They prepare the vaccines and other pharmaceuticals and other things. Testing kits. Testing kits is very costly. That HMPV virus, the testing is 10,000 rupees for one test. It's not worth it. It's a normal. I mean, tomorrow they will have a common cold experts now as a super specialization. I mean, this is what they are doing now. Earlier they had a general physician. Now they had a pulmonologist. They had a cardiologist. They had a I don't know what the general physician does. They are tough for with the human body also. Now they will have a common cold specialist as a super specialty. I mean, that is the. I mean, if this is the level they are going, science is finished now. I mean, you are not looking at the core problems. We have got the highest level of child malnutrition. Uh, India under 5 malnutrition. Every day we are losing about 4,000 under 5 children due to preventable disease from diarrhea and respiratory infections. Every day we lose. Otherwise, also we lose without any named virus HMPV. We lose about 2,000 children in India from respiratory illnesses. So you can raise an alarm like that. But those are the poor children who die. The poor children will die, and then they will they will put the panic among the middle class and well-to-do families that your children is at risk. Same like they are doing with monkeypox. Congo mein children are dying because of hunger, and they go and hunt the rodents and other things, and they catch the virus from the forest. And the children, they also have the malnutrition, severe malnutrition. They die of malnutrition with the, say, monkeypox virus, which in a normal person will have very less infection fatality rate. And they raised the case, they have declared it a public health emergency of international concern, saying that children are at risk now. I mean, the Congo children at risk. Outside Congo, there is again vaccines are ready for monkeypox also. So this is the problem. They will find one corner of the world and they will use the data and make some mathematical model and extrapolate it to the world as a doomsday. Same thing happened with the COVID pandemic. Nursing home average age of death was 80 years in, say, Italy or in Sweden and the mathematical model projected doomsday, and they locked down the whole world.
What do you think is a potential solution to?
I think it is
to return back to some kind of normality. You know, it's like the last 5 years. What you just said is, in my opinion, very correct, and it's also how I perceive this. But what is the solution? You know, we cannot keep living in a situation like this in which every day some kind of new outbreak is being indeed blown up to doom scenarios that that everybody is constantly living in some kind of fear and anxiety, which is totally unnecessary. How can we regain normality? Is there something we can do?
It is the awareness. It is the create awareness among the masses, among the people. And like this way, what we are doing. Now, I think it is happening. I think it is happening because, and once the people, the politician will listen to the votes actually, either note, a note means currency, or the vote. So, if you are getting money from pharmaceuticals, a time will come that you lose the votes from the people, electoral votes. If you lose the vote, the politician can change anytime. Politicians are opportunistic. They will see where the opportunity lies. So it is the solution lies in creating information. More and more people are made aware. Empowerment of the people. Empowerment of the people. Once they are empowered, I mean, I think to some extent, I think I wouldn't be very familiar with American political dynamics. To some extent, I think the people in America must have realized that is how Trump came to power. I think so. I mean, I may be naive. And the Jay Bhattacharya and Robert Kennedy, they are So hopefully, I think I have some optimism that if because America has become the bellwether for the whole world. So people imitate what's happening in America. So this something the political change has come in America because of, I think, people's awareness. And I think the people in our country also are aware. Actually, I keep talking to cab drivers wherever I go. They are the best source of information. So I have a feeling that, people are knowing it. They are keeping quiet, but once the people know it and the politician comes to know that people know it, they can change track. I mean,
I
they
have
are.
to, I have to be honest. If I look at my network here in India, most people I talk to, they're very aware,
They are very aware.
mostly.
And
And
that,
they also said, that was a huge test, that pandemic. And in the beginning, we thought, okay, this is, we're afraid and we just comply. But I saw after a year that people started changing here and were like questioning everything and were like, why did we even get a vaccine for something that
yeah, yeah,
probably won't even kill us?
yeah.
And so I have the impression here in India, at least, and I can't talk for the rest of Asia, but that you are well aware of what's going on, and you also have the opportunity to talk about it. Are
Yeah.
having a
I was
conversation
not
about this.
censored. Yeah,
But
I
in
have.
the EU, I'm not allowed to talk about this.
That way, I mean, the India is such a vast democracy; it's unmanageable, and there lies our hope because it is so big that I mean, you are in a Belgium, which can be a small country, but India is so big that no politician dare go beyond a certain limit. So, because I was never censored, I was expecting. I mean, when I was that time head of my department when the pandemic started. I retired in August this month, and the institution has retained me as professor emeritus. I mean, that's also in some other country I would have been sacked like you. So I always say, I had a chat with a professor in Stanford, professor of epidemiology and statistics. I know her, and she knows she is in the same department as Jay Bhattacharya. So she had purchased my book, that COVID Pandemic Third Eye. She read it and she said, I want to discuss this book with you. And we had a long chat like this late at night. I mean, it was morning for her, it was late for me. And she read it. She said, I'm so fascinating reading it. And you are speaking just like Jay Bhattacharya. I said, I'm just speaking what the science I know. I'm not speaking anything original. I'm surprised ki how you find it. So, yeah. बोलता नहीं जय भट्टाचार्य, your views are similar to Jay Bhattacharya's views, and don't you have problem with your university? I said, no. My university never asked me anything or never. Yeah. In fact, I myself went ki I am ready to resign anytime if you feel uncomfortable. My university, my dean said nothing, you carry on. And in fact, because I am retired from the armed forces, I get a pension. Financially, I don't require a job, whatever. So she was very surprised ki how you are. I said, this is what is India. In fact, to that extent, she said ki the students also boycott Jay Bhattacharya, the Stanford student. I said, then I had to really, I just spoke. I said, we Indians are compromised because of lack of resources. But we are not stupid. Our students are not stupid. They know what's happening. And you people have got all the resources. But you people are, I mean, your academics may be stupid. They really believe, the students really believe it's, and to some extent, I think because they, Western countries, some of them are, of course, manipulating the narrative. But many people go into the narrative because they really believe, because they have not seen communicable disease for many years. Most of the experts in epidemiology may not have seen. In India, we see communicable disease the moment we are in medical college. But now, of course, things are. I mean, now this was the most.
I think it has to do with the socioeconomical context as well.
Yes.
Here everyone is still, a lot of people are fighting for survival, but
Yeah,
people
exactly.
are trying to move up on the social ladder, social mobility, gain some access to more wealth, which keeps people alert, critical thinking. In the EU, it didn't exist anymore. People were completely, I don't know, it looked like I was living in between in a zombie land. Nobody was questioning anything. They just followed blindly whatever was proposed. So that's a huge difference between India, if I'm not mistaken, even when I first arrived here, November 21, and that suddenly pops up in my head. After 3 days, I bought myself the Times of India. And I opened the newspaper and I saw a split page. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the two persons mentioned there was you.
Oh,
Just remembered. On the left-hand side of the split page, there was an epidemiologist claiming that the measures were necessary to keep them in place, not to have a new surge of COVID. And on the other side of the split page, there was another epidemiologist, and if I'm not mistaken, it was you, that stated why it was unnecessary to maintain all these measures and that we should fall back on our natural immunity and that we have certain groups to protect, but we could not generalize it throughout the rest of the population. And I said, I read that there was a first time in, I think, 15 years that I saw a debate in a newspaper, because in Europe it doesn't exist. Debate has been cancelled there for over a decade, before the COVID pandemic even. So we always hear a one-sided narrative. And coming into India, and the third day after my arrival here, and opening a newspaper and just seeing two different viewpoints, I was completely shocked. I was like, wow, in India, there is a possibility to have a debate on this. And
yeah, that is
opened up not only my mind, but also my heart. And up until today, it's like you said, you never encountered any issue with your university or your colleagues, or in Europe, so many of my colleagues and myself in the meantime moved out of Europe, because up until today, this afternoon, I was blocked again on LinkedIn. My website was taken down. I was blocked on LinkedIn 3 times during the COVID pandemic. And a few days ago, I posted a small, not even politically inclined message on my LinkedIn, in which I stated, Europe is no longer the continent of milk and honey. You have so many taxation rates, high taxation rates, censorship, mis and disinformation are now put into a legislative framework in Europe, which is called the DSA, the Digital Services Act. So you're not allowed anymore to produce any dis or misinformation, or you get automatically cancelled. But nobody knows what the definition is of misinformation. Nobody states it anywhere. The same with misinformation. Nobody knows what it is. There is no definition. And who is going to decide what is dis or misinformation? Nobody knows. But they have an open framework now to cancel anyone who doesn't, or at least dares to challenge the narrative. Yeah, that's how far we go in Europe now. So I'm so happy that you had the chance at least to be a counter voice here. And I think you must have been influential, that a lot of people I talked to today are now aware that they are not going to be fooled again with this kind of yes, with this kind of news. And so to conclude,
just one question, Sam. Can you understand Hindi? Or
a few words, but I don't think I'll
because
be able.
Hindi reaches a large number of people in India, more than English. As you said, Indian middle class, as they are getting affluent, they are becoming more like European and American, with a less tolerance of any infection and all that. But the masses, they understand Hindi, and there's a Hindi journalist Asutosh Pathak. He has opened his own channel, and he has given us dedicated space. So we do the Hindi broadcast now. Daily I am doing Hindi broadcast at 9 o'clock on these messages, on mask, and we are going full spree that way. And one newspaper gave me a weekly column during the pandemic. That was National Herald. And all my opinions, counter views, they published it, my columns, and which I compiled it in the form of a book, COVID-19 Pandemic Third Eye. So as you rightly said, in India, we are not facing that much of authoritarianism, but there are people compromised because they are poor people, so for money, but they keep their thinking, I think, They are not like zombies, you said. We have people, because they have faced the hardship. They are in their lives, they are facing the hardship. They are worldly wise. And the more you develop, the more you get fragile. I mean, or masses are anti-fragile, to borrow a term from this Taleb. And in fact, I was surprised that Taleb also, I was disappointed during the pandemic. He also fell in the narrative. Otherwise, I thought he was a brilliant author. The Black Swan and all he has written, but he failed in the pandemic. And one thing I had a question. You said you were blocked on LinkedIn yesterday, but today I saw Mark Zuckerberg. He said they are not going to censor anymore Meta.
Yeah, that's also something we can talk about, but that's of course a different issue. It's not really health related, but I think it has to do with Trump. He fears Trump.
Yeah.
He has to come now. He's
No,
turning.
it is very much health related, Sam. I disagree, because all health messages do not go if there is censorship. So it is definitely.
Yeah, it's true. And I also blame Zuckerberg and Meta. And also LinkedIn, which is for Microsoft, and all the other social media, in the beginning even Twitter, that canceled a lot of dissenting voices, made it impossible to create a debate. And if you combine this with the fact that they were the proponents and the outlets as well to support all these lockdowns by just feeding one narrative, I think these social media companies and media in general have a huge responsibility in excess all-cause mortality that we still face today, because they created all this fuss why people got into anxiety, stress, psychological PTSD, and leading eventually to such an immune decline within the general population that a lot of people probably succumbed out of fear. And once they caught the virus, their immune system was so degraded, and also the fear they had that they were going to die led them to die eventually. So I think the media and social media have a huge responsibility. I think in a lot of cases of all-cause excess mortality we saw during the pandemic and still today. And in that perspective, I find it very hypocritical from Mark Zuckerberg that he now suddenly states, "Yeah, but we're not going to censor anyone anymore." Why the hell did you even do it from the beginning? You know, we are human beings. We are humanity as a whole. We deserve to be informed correctly from day one on any situation, and we need debate to make an informed decision ourselves. And all these things have been taken away from us since the pandemic. And I hope we can restore this in the future, because I think it's necessary. I have kids, and I don't want them to live in a world that we have seen in the last 5 years. You know, and I hope we can reverse a bit of what we've been through in the last 5 years. So coming to a conclusion, what do you think is needed to reverse this situation? Because I feel like we're, certainly from a media perspective, are still stuck in that fear-mongering narrative. How can we see to it that and governments and media change their perspective again towards some kind of normality that we need as humanity to keep thriving?
Very right, Sam. I totally agree with you. And as I said, it looked bleak to me also till some time back. But now, with the political dynamics in America, I mean, I never had great ear for Trump, but now I think we require him, because at least he has given a free hand to people who are rational, like Jay Bhattacharya or Robert Kennedy. Or he must have understood that people have understood, because he may be very sharp that way. So I think the other politicians, as it's the bottoms up approach will work. From the grassroots level, when the awareness is there, the politicians are very astute. So they will try to push the narrative as long as they think the people are fooled. But once they come to know the people are no longer fooled, They, if you see the present HMPV, this care, the government directives are also very guarded. I mean, they are just testing the water from the year. They are, every time they are reassuring, nothing to worry. I think had it been, had they known the people will be fooled, they would have raised the panic button from the very beginning. Of course, the media is doing its job because it has to raise the decibel level of panic for the TRP. You see, and many people who are sitting in their room just watching TV, they like such gory tales. Their truth is very boring for them. So they are watching it. They may be enjoying the fun, but in their hearts, I think the majority of Indians know it's all a, as we call it, it's all a which is going on. I think this time people will not fall into it. And with the changes, political changes, Amiga provided, the Jay Bhattacharya and Robert Kennedy are allowed to do the job because the pushback had already started. And I was surprised to see in medical journals also, including the BMJ, which have started to malign Robert Kennedy and Jay Bhattacharya, saying that they are anti-vaxxers. I mean, this is a term which is again, you can't have a general anti-vaxxer. Each vaccine is different. Some vaccines may be good, some may be not good. So you have to take, I mean, this is something. So hopefully I see some opportunity. So I think
right. Lovely to hear. I think what you are doing is very important, is indeed inform that grassroots movement.
That's why I have switched over to Hindi channels now. And the Hindi, one of the mainstream Hindi newspapers published my criticism in Hindi about the WHO pandemic treaty. And they gave both views, and they gave more column to my view, more space to my column. So that is interesting. That means the people are getting aware. And once the people get aware, the politicians will change course.
So let that be one of my future endeavors, to start learning Hindi, because I'm still missing out on a lot of people here, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. It was a pleasure. It was a real pleasure to interact with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for joining in today. It was a great talk. I am sure it will inspire a lot of people to keep the critical thinking high. We need it as humanity, and it will certainly bring us forward if we all pull together as a population and say that we don't want this no more. We want a return to some kind of normalcy. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.